So the trip, every White House hopes to get lots of coverage back home for the trip, see the president be presidential, announce the deliverables, hope to make them relevant to the real lives of real people. And it's not always as successful. It's rarely as successful as the trip planners and the president hope it is. That's true of presidents in both parties. The president yesterday gave as his main event, which happened after we were off the air, this speech in Saudi Arabia. Here's what our friend Batya said, 105, what she said about the speech. Okay. Anyone hoping to understand President Trump's foreign policy should watch his whole speech, probably the most momentous foreign policy address of my lifetime. Trump is building a new world order. I would encourage our allies to watch it closely so as not to miss out on what could turn out to be a once in a lifetime opportunity. I agree with Batya. It was a historic speech. It is barely covered in the American media today. Barely covered. What is covered is the plane. That's getting a lot of coverage. Now, I've said before, the only thing harder than running against Donald Trump is covering him. There's lots of tough choices to make. Usually, when Trump doesn't get coverage for something, I understand why, because I'm pretty sophisticated about these things. I'm baffled by this. This was an important, interesting, newsy speech. And I mean, open up the major newspapers, go on television. People are talking about the plane, but they're not talking about it. Sean, why is this speech not being covered?
Because honestly, because of their disdain for Trump. I mean, Batya is absolutely right. What he talked about in terms of Syria, Iran, the country specific stuff in itself was huge.
Correct.
The approach to foreign policy and understanding his way of thinking and his overall like America first way forward in it. Like, again, there were so many pieces of that speech that laid out how Trump views foreign policy, how he views specific countries, and the idea that, I mean, I can see not covering an aspect of the speech, right? So it's, hey, he talked about this and then neglecting to talk about how he addressed Iran or Syria. I still have issues with that, but to not talk about it writ large, to not have it lead headlines, to not talk about, lead morning programs or lead Washington, is just to me proof positive again of the disdain and bias, because it's not just bias, it's hatred.
I agree they have disdain and there's bias, but they cover plenty of things Trump does that despite that, it can't just be the normal explanation.
But okay, then what? I mean, I'm open to.
I don't know. Dan, do you have any idea why did that speech get no coverage?
No, in fact, I will say I was unaware of it until I saw Botcha's tweet, and like I knew he spoke, but then I went back and watched it on YouTube, and I was actually taken aback because I think you're both right. He did lay out in probably the best terms I've ever heard his theory of the case that basically to build your economy, to create wealth, that like we will partner with you on that front. I think there's holes in it, and there's problems with it, but that is Trump's theory of the case,
right? And that's the point, though, Dan. You could should have covered it, and
even if you disagree,
yeah, absolutely.
To me, it was the Middle East version of what the vice president did in Europe. It was talking about fundamental change, and again, you could say Trump's totally wrong, but he's the president of the United States speaking at an important conference. And again, I don't have it quantitatively. Like, I didn't watch every minute of the Today Show or every minute of World News Tonight, but I did a lot of flipping around, and it was nothing. And again, New York Times, the lead of the New York Times should have been, here's what Trump's foreign policy vision is.
And even frankly, if you wanted to criticize it, which I think like the New York Times and others would, like the fact that he basically said, like, hey, we're not going to turn our back on you. These partnerships matter, when like he just went to Europe and gave them the middle finger. Like, it was the complete opposite. But nevertheless, it is his view.
By the way, to answer your question, as someone who does read the chat like obsessively, there was a good one of the I'm now going back to find it, but remember when we talked about the pool yesterday, the White House Correspondents Association put out a statement bemoaning the fact that the wire services weren't included in the pool yesterday. Maybe this is part of their little payback is, all right, fine, then we won't do anything on it. But again, I have no, like, to Dan's critique, if you wanted to go after Trump on his approach to foreign policy, fair, right? That's but to just ignore it And oh, by the way, it to me that with everything that's going on, and if you can want to bemoan his approach to Europe or NATO or understand his thinking about the Middle East, then to ignore it to me was just an abdication. So for again, this goes back to for all of the sanctimonious elite whining about the First Amendment and everything that that they say that they support, to ignore a monumental speech of this level when it comes to redefining our role in the world, and at least the approach for the next 3 years, to me was an abdication of basic journalistic principles.
Couldn't agree more.
I'll just add one thing that struck me, and I wrote a little short thing on Substack about this. I actually thought it was like a return to the old realpolitik of the George H.W. Bush and Ronald Reagan, which is, we're going to do business with people who you may not love, right? Yeah. And we've got both, military interest, economic interest, foreign policy interest, China, everything.
But also some George W. But also some George W. Bush, like, we want to lift you up. We want to be We want to be your partners to lift up the people in your countries. Yeah. It's just crazy to me. All right.
I will say this, just as a side note, if you're interested, it's called Response 47. It's the White House Twitter feed. They did a fantastic job of putting out clips that were, digestible, a minute or so, of key aspects of the speech. So if you didn't see it and you just kind of want the Cliff Note version, check out that Twitter account. I think they did a really good job of making sure that people got that.
I agree, and you should do that if you don't have time for the whole thing. But the whole thing's obviously on YouTube, and I strongly recommend you watch the whole thing if you haven't.
That was a delicious video experience. I think you'll agree. Now, what you need to do in return for getting to enjoy that is hit the subscribe button, be part of the two-way community, never miss a thing.